Good evening, everybody. My name's Lavinia, and I am director and founder of the M Word and Emotional Problem Solving. Thank you very much to my guests who very kindly agreed to come and join me in discussion. We've got so many people that actually we can't get everybody in the same room, as it were, together. So I'm doing it in two bits, and the lovely Yasmin is going to be editing to get us all looking as if we're having a major discussion between all of us in one sitting, as it were, which is just incredible because I don't have those skills myself. Some people have very kindly agreed to come and talk with us, but obviously don't feel so comfortable with being seen. So, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not interested in who's actually joining. What I'm really interested and hopeful for is the length of conversation we have in and around panic disorder. So we're hopeful that we'll get a variety of experiences, but also perspectives. And I'm really hopeful that by the end of our session, we will have a much greater knowledge around panic disorder. And the first thing I want to say about panic disorder is that it is a minority that affects a minority of people. And for a lot of people, it doesn't strike rather obvious that somebody is having a panic attack. And it could be that everything is so internalized within an autistic presentation that you might not even be aware, and indeed the individual might not even be aware that they're experiencing any panic. So if we think about panic itself from a clinician's point of view, what I'm kind of thinking about is, does somebody experience a racing heart? Does somebody experience where they think they are trembling a lot or shaking a lot? Does somebody feel like their heart's just going to burst as if they're going to have a heart attack because it feels so stressful? There are others that are less obvious. So, for example, sometimes somebody can be extremely scared and they don't know why. And sometimes people are actually scared of being scared and they don't know why. So I'm just wondering if anybody's had those type of experiences, or they've talked with other people about experiences around panic. Does anybody kind of want to go first?
I can, Lavinia, if you like.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I've got experience of all that you're describing from when I was a child at school. I didn't know why I was anxious, or I didn't know why I was feeling like that. I couldn't swallow food, and I couldn't swallow drink. I couldn't be in school, and I just panicked constantly. I remember my dad bringing me sandwiches in the middle of the night to feed me because that was when I was hungry, but all day long I was never hungry. And it went on and on and on. Obviously lost lots of weight and didn't know, and nobody knew, and the professionals just kept weighing me and saying I was too thin, I needed to put weight on. My parents said, I'll give you £1 for every pound you put on. And it was like so much pressure because I had no idea why I was not eating and why I couldn't eat. I wanted to eat so much, but I just couldn't. And I could see the waste, and I felt guilty that mum and dad were throwing away plates of food and stuff. But all the professionals told me I was anorexic, and I used to stand in the mirror and like go, well, I don't feel like I'm overweight. I look thin. I don't look fat. I don't feel like that. It didn't make any sense to me at all. But that panic of like, something's wrong with me, but nobody knows what it is, and I don't know what it is. And it just went on. And then in the end, just kind of fizzled out, and everything went back to normal for a bit. So
that's really helpful. So thank you so much for sharing that, because that's actually a very interesting perspective, isn't it? Where loads of professionals are insisting on having you weighed. So that must have reiterated to everybody that there was a weight issue, but not actually looking at what was the root cause. And I think that's quite a bit of an issue for a lot of individuals, isn't it? That we're not looking at the root cause as to why we might be experiencing panic.
I was just a school refuser, and I kept thinking of all these things that might have happened to me over the years. I lost my sister when she was just a baby. and I think they thought it was like delayed grief, that
Yeah.
was a year on or so, and things like that. So nobody quite knew what was going on. And even now, my mum will say, I still don't, I couldn't have told you that that's what it was at the time. It was actually a phobia of sickness, and it kind of got worse and worse over the years. But nobody knew anything. Let alone little me when I was 7 or 8. So
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Did you notice when it started?
No.
Or is it just a sort of memory of when you were a child and you can remember that it was that age?
Well, it's from having a emetophobia, which is a sickness phobia, and it's because there were 3 boys that were sick on me and my dinner when I was at school, and nobody really remembered. It was quite messy, quite kind of get everyone out of the hall quickly situation. I've gone and spoken to teachers and things who were there at the time, but they don't really remember. But they sent me home because I fainted, and they thought that I was sort of poorly as well, and it was the Christmas holidays then, so I had 2 weeks at home and then went back, and I couldn't go back after the holidays, so it was like a block, and I really just tried everything. So my poor mum, I tried everything. I locked myself in the bathroom, and she had the head teacher come and get me out of the bathroom and things like that. It was just traumatic for everybody, and she didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
So do you think that was like the big trigger? So
yeah,
definitely. Just sort
definitely.
of.
And it's why I couldn't eat, because I thought I associated everything with like being in the dinner hall. I couldn't be in there, and being up the table with my family. I couldn't cope with that either. But I could never verbalize any of this because I couldn't remember what that 10 minutes that happened in school that day. I still can't remember it 30 odd years on. So it's quite strange. But then I went back to normal after that for a bit, and then some years later, something triggered it again, and I had another time of losing lots of weight, and I knew then I had a phobia, but I didn't know that it was stemmed from way back when. So yeah, it's been quite a challenge over the years. But the panic bit has always been there, panic attacks. And I'd love to know, what's the magic cure when you're having one? Because I have no idea.
Yep. We had $1 for everyone. We'd be rich.
I would be so rich. Apparently splashing cold water on your face is meant to stop you panicking, but I haven't done that.
I wanted to say, Hannah, that I'm parenting a child who has only very recently been able to articulate the words behind the feelings. And because they're so keen, or were so keen, and rated other people's feelings higher than her own, it's only since it utterly completely went wrong that now we have now we have language that means she can express herself. And whilst you would always want to take the entire experience away from her, watching her journey into being able to express the feelings and the panic and the physical sensations or not, or on different days, has been truly amazing to witness alongside her.
Mm-hmm.
And just heartbreaking, because I'm fairly certain it's probably been there for a very long period of time, but just with no language to express it.
That really resonates with me too, because I'm parenting a child who really struggles with school refusal, and when you ask what's going on, she finds it very difficult to explain the feelings that she has, and I don't necessarily think even she knows what's triggered it, but she's now got fear itself almost, because she's sort of trying to organize her whole life so that she can evacuate school if she needs to. So she won't sit at the back of a classroom if the door's at the front. She finds that really, really difficult. She's got absolutely paranoid that people comment if she needs to leave the room, but of course she's got in her head she's going to panic and need to leave the room, so she's got that cyclical thing where it goes round and round. She doesn't want to be at the top of the school because where we pick her up is at the bottom, so she wants to avoid any classes that are right at the top in case she needs to leave, and that it's a sort of downward spiral, because if she then has to be in a room at the top, she's more likely to have a panic attack, and therefore she's more likely to want to have to leave. And no matter how much you try and talk to her about it, these have become sort of facts in her mind, not that was there clearly irrational to anyone from the outside looking in. To her, they're truths that she needs to sit near the door, and she might feel terrible at any time. And it's really heartbreaking to watch. So have you been doing therapy with your child to help her open up, or him open up, or has it just been happening naturally? Yes.
Yes, yeah, we're and fully out of education at the moment, and it's taken 10 months, and last week I discovered, or she managed to say, just before not obviously we knew that it was an end of attendance was coming, but she said, oh, I was given a form, and I still don't understand if it was a whole school Ofsted form or a particular just for her form. And she said, I was asked to write down, one of the questions was, do you feel safe in school? And so I try very hard not to ask leading questions. So I said, oh, right, what did you put? Thinking I already knew what she was going to write. And she said, oh, I felt safe. And I said, oh, well, did you though? And she went, no, but because she didn't know what they were going to do if she wrote, no, I don't feel safe, she couldn't alert them to the fact that she didn't feel safe. So she wrote what she thought they wanted to hear, because that was safer than acknowledging that she wasn't okay. And that's taken 10 months to just touch upon. And we're not back to functioning anywhere close to what other people consider a horrible word, but normal. So I think we're quite happy within ourselves that we're doing the right thing, but it's not the standard, because we're not on that path.
No, I get that. I think we have a similar thing where I say, well, look, the school's trying to help you. So if you need access to a toilet that isn't the public toilets because you feel you might be sick at any time, there's one in health and wellbeing you could ask. She's like, I don't want to ask because they're going to want to talk to me all the time about it, and I don't want to talk to them. And because she's phobic now about being trapped in a room with a grown-up and not being able to leave, she'll try and minimize any form of conversation to avoid that. So it's really challenging because she's sort of painting herself into a corner, as it were.
I think what I find really interesting about all of this is, we try so hard in schools to try and understand our young people, and we try desperately to reassure them they can come to us at any point. But what we're hearing is actually it's really difficult and painfully difficult for a young person to A, go and get the help that they need, and B, that wanting to go and get the help, because that then raises more issues. And that's quite challenging, isn't it? If you've got panic disorder in your presentation, because you're naturally going to be on edge, aren't you, all the time? Panic disorder, for sure, does not allow you to have respite. It's just this general unease throughout all day, every day. And that's really challenging, because if you think about somebody with autism and, say, for example, PDA, whilst the PDA can be more, I suppose, obvious, panic disorder isn't necessarily so obvious. And a lot of people could be forgiven for assuming, okay, well, panic disorder is panic attacks, right? But actually, it's much bigger than that. A panic attack is something that you can actually visibly see and hear at times, but that isn't all what panic disorder is about. So if you think about a young person who's trying not to sort of be noticed by others and are really worrying about, can I make sure I'm near an exit? Can I make sure a teacher doesn't speak to me? Can I make sure that I'm not going to be sick? If you're spending all your lesson time thinking about all of that, it's not a conducive environment to learning, because all you're thinking about is, I hope I'm not going to be sick. I hope I can get out, and I hope that I can be staying safe and get through the day. And that just seems so challenging to me when people can't see or hear that dialogue going on, you know, that internal sense of ill feeling. You know, it's horrible feeling you're going to be sick. Imagine what it must be like if you're feeling that you're going to be sick, you're terrified that you're not going to get out of a building safely, and you're terrified that someone's going to ask you questions, and you've got autism and you've got PTA. It must be absolutely horrendous, mustn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did the school obviously trying to get her back in, and I have made it very clear that getting her to be in there is not the desired outcome. If she can be there but feels absolutely lousy all day, that to me is not a desirable outcome.
No.
That's not the right answer. It would be lovely if we could wave a wand and she would go and it would all be lovely, and she didn't feel the way she feels. But I just felt very strongly at the end of last term that, I mean, she's one of the bravest people I know, because I couldn't get up and do that every day. And so I feel like, you know, there's an assumption from the school, if they can go there and sit there and just focus on not being sick for 6 hours, that's kind of okay, but that's a miserable existence.
You see, I don't think it is okay. And you know, I suppose why I've got so critical in my letters when I'm writing the reports, I feel very strongly that, you know, I'm not just looking at the short term, I'm looking at the long term. And what people again don't appreciate is, if you think about generalized anxiety as an umbrella, the spokes that hold the generalized umbrella are the different presentations we each have. So some of us might worry more about health anxiety, some of us might have panic, some of us might have a germ phobia, some of us might have OCD, but those spokes are your personal presentation of mental ill health. And if we only look at the short-term picture of, like, you've got to go to school, you've got to be able to survive, you've just got to get through this, just suck it up, buttercup, you know, with as much support as you can, but just get through it. That's fine in a short piece, but actually when you're experiencing huge volumes of adrenaline for 6 hours a day, times 5 days a week, times 4 weeks in a month, times several months of a year, actually the bigger picture is we are lending itself to an adult experiencing regular mental ill health and illness for the rest of their adult life. And I cannot sign myself up to that. So I've become really critical in my reports, going, look, as a mental health specialist, I'm not just looking at today, I'm looking at everything that I've been told about, and I can see the trajectory. And actually, for all the years of experience I have, what I am desperate to avoid is a child or a teenager breaking down in their mental health, because I know if they have one breakdown, they are more fragile and more likely to have another breakdown. They have 2 breakdowns, you can literally guarantee that within a year they'll have their third, and it's downhill, all the way downhill. They'll be dependent on mental health adult services. Now, I know that trajectory, so what I really want to do is to be able to support schools in understanding, as well as parents, as well as the young person, if this is the presentation, we've got to do something about it. And panic disorder is a nasty one. It's so nasty because it's just so persistent. And yet so often we have the autistic presentation determined that we're going to fly right under the radar. You know, just like you were saying with your daughter about, you know, I don't know, I should just answer, yes, I feel safe. When I know damn well that isn't true. You know that's not true. And so many of our parents know that their children do not feel safe. And yet I think schools find it really difficult to understand. What do you mean you don't feel safe? We're providing this safe environment for you. We're trying to keep everybody safe. We're trying to promote this well-being. We're trying to foster, look after ourselves as a community, but also as an individual. But I think it's so unfair because schools are just simply not trained as mental health clinicians, and neither are parents. So how do we meet in the middle with that understanding?
I think because the agenda is so strong in terms of attendance and the pressure on them, so as in the school or the college or wherever, so high, it biases them away from probably actions that they know are right in a different format. So
Yes.
again, it took 6 months for the words to come out. But we were driving and she was sitting beside me, and I don't know what was on the radio, nothing particularly. And we drove past a different school because we can't drive past the one that was attended. And we drove past a different secondary school within school hours to get home. And she suddenly said, well, they talk about and they teach us about mental health and mental well-being. But why, if they were able to teach me about it, did they not see that it was going wrong?
Yeah.
And you sort of go, well, fair point, actually. And then it made me really question it. It's like, well, if you've got enough skill to teach a child, all right, maybe to a basic level about their mental well-being, and then you're not recognizing the signs in front of you, because by the end, obviously, she displayed lots of ill health. There's got to be something preventing you from actioning what you know and you see from an education perspective. And the only thing I can think of is that the agenda is so high for attendance, it overrules everything else. And once you have that, even if you could, which you couldn't, but even if you could get to, Miss, I need to go out, Miss, I need to do this, Sir, I need to, you're going to be met by an adult that's got a different motive behind what they do next as their next treating action.
I totally
really
agree with
sadly.
that. I feel that very strongly myself. I mean, we've had lots of examples of my daughter going to the wellbeing centre and saying, I've got a headache, when, you know, I was very clear with the school before she went, she suffered with anxiety, and they'd say, no, you haven't, that's not true, is it? You need to get back to school, and marching her back into the classroom, when a more obvious response would be, oh, that's interesting, known sufferer of anxiety has come out of the classroom, perhaps they just need a little time to regroup themselves. They certainly don't need to be told they're a liar and marched back through the corridors. And I think and that's a person in the wellbeing centre who theoretically has been trained in dealing with mental health conditions. And I think it's very hard to know, because there is this huge, particularly post-COVID, this huge obsession with attendance. And getting everyone's school hours back up. But as you say, there's no point sitting there if you're not learning anything.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how, well, certainly for me, I hear this on a daily basis, but isn't it interesting how a lot of young people do actually speak a language that we all get? I've got a headache, I've got a tummy ache, I've got a sore leg, I mean, you know, my hand hurts to write. And yet actually we know, or we should know, that autistic people might sound like they speak the same language, but actually they speak a very different language. They've learned to imitate, they've learned to mimic in a way that they think that people will understand. And when you're experiencing high anxiety, your capacity to be able to articulate what's going wrong literally is going like that. And if you look around you at your peers, there are so many young people who say, I don't want people looking at me. I don't want people knowing, why are you going out to class early? Why are you not able to, you know, do the work? Why are you not like us? They don't want any of that, because it's just drawing yet more attention. And already our young people are struggling with the understanding that they're different, that something's not quite right, but they don't know exactly what is not right. They're so dependent on adults knowing what's going wrong. And quite often, clearly, a lot of us don't know what's going wrong. And I think that doesn't help.
And it can
Lavinia. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you
I was
could
just
go
going
on.
to say, it can ultimately just be so dangerous, not just in terms of a trajectory off into adulthood, but when you bring it right back to the here and now. You know, I had to persuade a certain young person today they had to have some school-based vaccines, and we can't access it in that building, so we have to, we had different provision done, and every t-shirt on the member staff said school immunisation team, and yet it was held in a library, and they were amazing and they were wonderful, but they still had the word school written on. And you just think, oh, I've worked so hard. We've done 10 months. We're going to be working for months and months and months, if not years. And the position it's put me in as a parent to try and achieve a relatively straightforward task, to have potentially life enhance, illness preventing serious illnesses, to get to access the vaccine. It's taken me 2 months, where everyone else has just sent their child to school and they're joined in a line, and it's easy. And so the complications for life for our whole family as well as our child's is just immense. For what probably started as that, you're fine, you've got a little bit of a headache and off you go again. And I don't think people fully realise the complications and the issues that arise from it.
I know, and I had one of my non-executives last night saying the trouble is that, you know, mental health is so in vogue and people misuse, you know, saying, oh, I've got mental health issues. And I think, God, that's really scary, because actually we should be talking about our mental health in equal terms to our physical health and well-being. But of course, if we're seen to be just using it, you know, to get out of doing something, that already has a very dangerous connotation, does it not? Because then people misunderstand it, and the young person is under even more pressure, you know, to try and conform when they're already struggling. If they had an understanding that people are saying, oh yeah, but you're just using it, especially if you can't see it.
I think as well, if it's something like if I think the presentation of autism and panic is made very difficult because of this internalizing. I don't know if that's common amongst all autistic people, but certainly my daughter always goes in when she's having a hard time, and it can take a lot to get her to go out, and so that it's very hard for you know, if she was crying or like gasping for breath or any of those things, I think it's a lot easier for people to be sympathetic. It's a lot easier for people to understand, whereas she's just incredibly quiet, then leaves, and then just wants to come home, and can be quite stroppy if if somebody's stopping her because she doesn't want to get into a conversation about it. And I think that just makes it particularly difficult for people to cope with.
Yeah. Has anybody had any sort of like different experiences of what panic has looked like, you know, the sort of different types of traits, should we say, around panic disorder? Has anybody had any different experiences?
I have, Lavinia.
Go on.
When I was 14 and I was at school, I can vividly remember one day just everything was just normal, and I was just knocking about in the playground, and I just stopped dead in my tracks, and I just had this horrible feeling come over me, like I wasn't in my body. And I can't explain it. I just felt like I wasn't really there, and everything was unreal, and it was like a dream. And I can remember like I was nipping myself, and then like I got this rush going right through my body, and I know now that it was adrenaline. I've been able to identify that now, and like a sickly feeling and my heart beating, and I just ran. And that just came out of nowhere. Like, you know, there wasn't anything going on. It was just like a physical, and like I'm 46 now, and I've had that since I was 14, but mine tends to be like physical sensations in my body.
And they're incredibly uncomfortable, but when they come out of nowhere, they're incredibly frightening, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's led to a bit of health anxiety with myself. And I will take medication for it now, but it's horrible. It's not nice.
No. And was it just the heart racing, or were there other things that kind of really frightened you with that?
Well, I thought I was going to die.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. I just thought I was going to die there on the spot.
Yeah.
And then you've got a fear of it coming again.
This is it.
So then I can resonate with what the other girls were saying. Like I couldn't sit in a school assembly because I needed to know where the door was so I could get out, and like sweating and just that horrible feeling. What if that happens?
Yeah. it is that horrible feeling of not knowing when it's coming again. And
Yeah.
I think that must be a very awful sensation to have day in, day out, not knowing if it's happening again. And also, you know, if you've had one, you never really want to experience that again. So the knowledge that if it does happen again and again, and there's no warning or no obvious trigger, kind of has you very kind of upset, because you just don't know when it's next coming. And you know, when we think about some children experience, and it is horrendous to hear, because it terrorizes the parents, but sometimes children are so distressed they actually pass out, and it looks like they're having an epileptic fit. And obviously they go for the MRI scan, they get investigated, there's nothing physical found, and doctors only then are able to say, look, this is extreme anxiety. Well, the minute they're talking about extreme anxiety, we know we're talking about panic disorder, because it's such a rarity. But you know, to even come round from that, not knowing what's happened, just knowing that, you know, 1 minute you were feeling fine and the next minute feeling so scared that you just completely don't remember what happened. It's scary stuff.
We've had 3 episodes of that happening, and so how I've dealt with it is that we've decided to almost own it. And so I'm not necessarily going to be very articulate in trying to explain it, but rather than, we don't want it to happen, and we both know that we don't want it to happen, but we talk in terms of, well, it could, and it probably will. And so we talk in terms of, well, if it were to probably will happen again, what should we do about it? What might make it a little bit easier? What might make it this? And it has all, it's okay as today, but you know, every day's a new day, but it's almost lost some of its power in going, you know, it might happen again, and it must make it sound really flippant. I'm making it sound flippant, and I'm not, because it's not my body that's doing it, it's somebody else's body. But just owning it, just, this is how it is right now, and it seems to have made a little bit of a difference, if that doesn't sound strange.
We talk about anxiety a bit like that in our house. I've got 5 autistic children, and they all have varying degrees of panic or anxiety, or moments where you have to kind of intervene a little bit. And one of them, my daughter, has really bad panic attacks, and I never know what to do in that moment. I should know, because I go through them. I have been through them, I've been there. But I love what you're saying about owning that, and sort of saying it will help. Because my mum used to say to me, you will be sick again one day, like we all get ill. And I'd be like, oh, it's just so horrible, the thought of it. But then I know actually it sort of took away a bit of the fear, because I kind of was frightened of the fear of being sick. And sort of the panic came from the fear of being panicky. And I think that's what my daughter is like. She panics when her dad goes away to work. And so now I feel like I could, in advance, I could preempt that this might happen, and we could talk about it, and it might not happen then. So that's a good idea. But they all of them have anxiety in a different way, and 2 of them, selective mute, probably wouldn't tell me, and I have to spot it. I have to look at them and really know what's going on, you know, and then teach the teachers to, can you just notice that they're actually having a panic? And we're getting there with one of the teachers. My son isn't in school, and he can't be in school because of all the panics he's had that we didn't know about for years and years. And now he's not able to even look at a mainstream school anymore. Like Vicky was saying, you know, we can't drive past. We can see it out of our window, but we can't look at it. And, you know, all this trauma has happened from being in that panic situation where you can't get out. You try and get out, or someone says, it's all right, you can come to the learning base, and you can come there, and it's fine anytime you like. And the next time he goes there, because he's not okay, they say, have a drink of water, off you go, back to your lesson. I'll write you a
Mm.
note. And that kind of thing, where it's just, there's no consistency and he doesn't trust anyone, you know. And then it's sort of like trying to build him back up again. That's the hardest bit, really, is, you know, working out how we deal with these things. And obviously being at home for a year or however long he's been at home, he's told us more and more of the things that he struggled with back then, and like we just can't believe that we put him through it without realizing, you know, we're just off to school, come on, don't really think about it. And he just thought we would be in so much trouble if he didn't go. And it's just, you know, terrible, the things that he felt and he went through that we're now learning about. So I've digressed, sorry.
I think children can be incredibly loyal to their parents and take a huge amount of responsibility which is not theirs to take, but they do it because they feel terribly obligated to be more responsible over their own health and taking decisions and not sharing it because of their perceptions of how they should be coping. But again, it's looking around at other people. And I know that last year I started working with a young person who had been so badly traumatized by school that they literally stopped talking. Just, that was it. And they have a fear that has been reiterated by other young people that I've seen, that if they start talking, they will be forced back to school. And it's awful to try and get over to them that that isn't going to be the case, because they feel terribly traumatized, and that belief that nobody was able to help me, even though I should have felt safe. I wasn't able to convey that I didn't feel safe, but nobody was able to understand what my needs were. And that's really hard, because there's an awful lot of young people who are acutely aware that their parents are being sent letters saying you will be fined if you don't, you know, comply. And children feel very responsible in that, okay, well, I'm just going to have to go then, because I don't want my parents going to prison. I don't want my parents being fined, and I don't want to get my parents into trouble, and I don't want to get into trouble. So I will keep going for as long as I can. And of course, if you have your sort of mental ill health presentation of panic, it's only going to get worse. It isn't going to get better. And the other thing that I've learned over the last 30 years is generally those with panic generally never ever have that leave them. They either learn to avoid situations or sort of environments, or they have to take some form of medication to try and just numb that awful level of high anxiety that's just coursing through your veins all the time. And I think people don't kind of get that about panic. You know, it's either obvious where you're struggling to breathe and you need that paper bag syndrome, or you don't have it, and there's so much more to it than that. Thank you so much. I'm extremely grateful to all of you for helping out with this, because I think this has been incredibly valuable. And I think it would be really helpful to so many other people who just haven't considered, you know, how difficult it is for our children, but also for us, you know, in sharing our knowledge and experiences, you know, what it might look like for other people who have no idea.